At this moment, Mexican citizen and convicted cop killer Edgar Tamayo is set for lethal injection in the U.S. state of Texas. He was convicted in the 1994 shooting death of a Houston police officer. For years, the Mexican government and leading U.S. officials have been trying to block the execution, arguing it would violate international law. Franc Contreras is following the case live for us from Mexico City. Frank.
Mike, there are concerns that the inmate in question here, Edgar Tamayo, did not receive the legal representation that he deserves under international law. A former governor of Texas, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Mexico, and even U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry have all called for a reprieve. CCTV has learned that high-level talks on this case have taken place between the United States and Mexico. Still, Texas is holding firm, and just a few hours ago, a state clemency board voted unanimously to proceed with the scheduled execution.
Edgar Tamayo was sentenced to die for the 1994 murder of a Houston, Texas police officer. Tamayo was in the United States illegally, and his lawyer says that at the time he spoke little English and was mentally ill. The United Nations International Court of Justice ruled a decade ago that Tamayo was entitled to representation from Mexico's consular office in the United States, representation that he did not get.
The Mexican government will continue to fight until the last second and will put forth all of its efforts to prevent this execution from happening.
The International Court ruling named 50 other Mexican nationals who are also entitled to diplomatic assistance. Of them, 2 have been executed, both in Texas. Among them was 33-year-old Jose Medellin, convicted of the rape and murder of 2 teenage girls, also in Houston. Before his execution, former President George W. Bush ordered Texas to review the conviction. But the state's then Solicitor General turned leading U.S. Republican Senator Ted Cruz argued that the president had no authority to order his state to honor the decision. The court agreed, and Medellin was executed. Last fall, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry wrote a letter urging Texas Governor Perry to reconsider Tamayo's case. Kerry wrote that he was concerned that the state's handling of the case could affect how Americans are treated abroad.
We take seriously our obligations to uphold consular access for folks incarcerated here because we go all over the world and ask other countries to do the same thing and apply those same obligations when our folks are incarcerated overseas.
Mexico's ambassador to Washington, several legislators here, and the country's foreign minister have all petitioned the United States to reconsider. Mexican rights groups like the National Human Rights Commission and even Amnesty International are also calling for a stay of execution.
The consular assistance is particularly important for the foreigners in case of the death penalty because they're in a country where they don't know the laws and they don't know the system. There's no second chance here. If a mistake is being made, a person will die and justice won't be served.
Tamayo's scheduled execution was supposed to happen at 1800 hours Central Time. That's 6 p.m. here in this central part of the world here. A Texas spokesperson for the Texas Corrections Department tells CCTV that only a directive from the state governor of Texas or a court order could delay this execution, neither of which is expected to happen, Mike.
Frank, there's been concern, though, as of late about the type of drugs being used here in the United States for execution. Several drug manufacturers have stopped selling their products or even stopped making them to prevent states from using them for execution. So can you give us an idea of what's happening there in the state of Texas?
Well, in the state of Texas, they use a drug called pentobarbital, Mike, and that drug, they say, works on most occasions. They've never really had any major issues when it comes to executions and that drug. But other states, like Ohio, have had to switch the kinds of drugs they're using during lethal injections and executions of this sort. An inmate just last week in the state of Ohio took more than half an hour to die, Mike. He was gasping for air in the very last moments of his life. According to witnesses, they say he did not go peacefully. And remember, at this very hour, right now, Edgar Tamayo is in an execution chamber being put to death. Mike.